Easter Island. How did the great Moai civilization disappear? The wind howls over the empty plains of a lonely island, lost in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. Scattered across its green hills stand colossal stone figures, their eyes gazing towards the horizon with an eerie, eternal vigilance. Who carved these silent sentinels, and what happened to the people who once worshipped them? This is the mystery of Rapa Nui, the enigmatic Easter Island, a tale of human ambition, ingenuity, and ultimate downfall. Chapter 1. The arrival of the first settlers. Centuries ago, long before European explorers set foot on its shores, Easter Island was a lush paradise, teeming with palm forests and exotic birds. The first settlers arrived from Polynesia, guided by the stars and their deep knowledge of the ocean. They called their new home Rapa Nui and brought with them everything they needed to survive: sweet potatoes, chickens, and a culture rich in mythology and tradition. As they stepped onto the island, the dense jungles and pristine beaches provided an abundant new world for these daring explorers to shape into a thriving community. It is believed that the Polynesians reached Easter Island sometime between the 12th and 14th centuries. The voyage was nothing short of extraordinary. Imagine navigating thousands of kilometers of open sea, with no maps, relying solely on the movement of the waves and the position of the stars. Modern science confirms that Polynesians were some of the greatest navigators in human history, capable of crossing vast oceanic distances with astonishing precision. Their seafaring skills were passed down through generations, with advanced knowledge of wind patterns, ocean currents, and the subtle signs of nature guiding them on their epic journeys. Upon arrival, the settlers found a land rich in resources. The volcanic soil proved to be fertile, allowing them to cultivate crops such as taro, bananas, and sweet potatoes. The island was also home to a wealth of animals, including a unique species of bird, the Rapa Nui, which became an integral part of the islanders' diet and culture. The settlers quickly established their villages, with their homes made from locally sourced materials such as palm thatch and stone. They also began to carve out a deep connection with the island's spiritual landscape, as evidenced by the incredible Moai statues that would later become a symbol of Easter Island's mysterious civilization. The Polynesian settlers' society began to flourish, but their isolation also led to significant cultural and environmental changes. As the centuries passed, they constructed the monumental Moai statues, which were thought to embody the spirits of their ancestors. The islanders believed that the Moai held the power to protect and guide their communities. The larger the statue, the more prestigious the ancestor it represented. By the 15th century, Rapa Nui had become home to an advanced society with complex social structures, including chiefs, artisans, and priests, all of whom contributed to the creation of these awe-inspiring statues. Yet, the thriving civilization was about to face a looming crisis. As the population grew, the island's resources began to dwindle, leading to environmental degradation. Forests were cleared to make way for agriculture and the construction of the Moai, and the once abundant bird life began to disappear. Over time, the island's fragile ecosystem began to collapse under the weight of human activity, setting the stage for the eventual disappearance of the Moai civilization. How and why this magnificent society fell remains one of the most captivating mysteries in the history of Easter Island. Chapter 2. The Rise of the Moai. As the population of Rapa Nui flourished, their social structure became more complex, and so did their ambitions. With an increasing sense of identity and culture, the Rapa Nui people turned to stone to honor their ancestors. The Moai, towering statues, carved meticulously from volcanic tuff, became a symbol of power, spirituality, and connection to the divine. Each Moai represented a revered ancestor, embodying their spirit and authority to guide and protect the living. These monumental figures, often with exaggerated facial features and symbolic details, were placed upon platforms called ahu, strategically positioned along the coastline to overlook the people and the sea. The largest of these statues stood over 30 feet tall, with some weighing more than 80 tons, a feat of engineering that still baffles modern scholars. The construction of these awe-inspiring figures was a monumental task, and their creation stretched over centuries. The early Rapa Nui people carved and refined the Moai using primitive tools, laboriously shaping the volcanic rock into the iconic forms we see today. But the question that lingered for centuries was how these massive statues were transported across the island. When European explorers first arrived, they hypothesized that the statues were dragged along the ground using logs, but this theory seemed almost too simple given the complexity of the statues themselves. Modern-day experimentation, however, uncovered a more intricate solution. Researchers have proposed that the Moai were walked upright across the island, using an advanced system of ropes and coordination. By pulling and guiding the statues side to side, the Rapa Nui people were able to make the statues sway and shift, propelling them forward with each movement. This method, known as the walking theory, aligns with oral traditions passed down through generations, with the elders telling stories of the Moai seemingly walking to their final locations as if alive. These statues, some of which took years to carve and transport, were seen as vital conduits between the past and present, their presence a constant reminder of ancestral power. But as these magnificent statues were being raised, the island's delicate ecosystem began to change. The resources that had allowed the Rapa Nui people to thrive, namely the vast forests that once covered the island, were being depleted at an alarming rate. The trees, used for construction and as fuel for cooking, were being harvested faster than they could regenerate. As the population grew, so too did the strain on the environment, which would ultimately play a significant role in the decline of the Moai civilization. Despite their mastery in stone carving and transportation, the Rapa Nui people were faced with a looming crisis that would soon threaten their way of life. Chapter 3. A Society in Decline. At the height of their civilization, the Rapa Nui were unparalleled in their mastery of the land, shaping a society that flourished for centuries. The monumental Moai statues, carved from volcanic rock, stood as symbols of both spiritual devotion and political power. These towering figures, some reaching heights of up to 33 feet, were the pride of the island. But the very creation of these statues, which required immense resources, would ultimately sow the seeds of their downfall. The increasing demand for Moai statues to honor ancestors and chiefs led to an insatiable need for timber to transport the massive stones across the island. As the trees were felled to serve this purpose, deforestation spread across the island like wildfire. By the time the 15th century arrived, nearly all of Rapa Nui's forests were gone. Without trees, the Rapa Nui could no longer construct the canoes necessary for fishing in the rich deep waters around the island. With their access to fish diminishing, the people turned to farming as their primary source of food. However, the volcanic soil of Easter Island, rich in iron but poor in nutrients, struggled to sustain the growing population. Crops such as sweet potatoes, taro, and yams became scarce, and the community's reliance on them only worsened the agricultural crisis. By the 17th century, the consequences of these environmental changes began to unravel the once thriving civilization. Famine spread across the island, claiming countless lives. The societal cohesion that had once bound the Rapa Nui together shattered, and the island fractured into hostile factions. These groups, desperate for resources, turned on each other in acts of violence and destruction. The Moai statues, once towering symbols of authority and spiritual protection, were toppled and destroyed. Some were thrown into the sea, while others were pulled from their platforms and shattered to pieces in violent acts of revenge and retaliation. The great statues, once revered, now lay broken, silent witnesses to the collapse of the island's social order. The power struggle and internal conflict only deepened the crisis. The Rapa Nui people, now divided and weakened by famine and warfare, faced their darkest hours. The vibrant culture that had once thrived on the island was all but lost, buried beneath the rubble of their fallen statues and shattered society. What had once been a highly advanced and organized civilization was now crumbling into chaos, leaving behind only ruins and unanswered questions about how such a powerful society could disappear into the depths of history. Chapter 4. First Contact and New Perils. In the early 18th century, the outside world finally discovered Easter Island. Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen landed on its shores on Easter Sunday in the year 1722, giving the island its modern name. He was astonished by the massive Moai statues, which towered over the landscape like silent sentinels. These stone figures, representing the ancestors of the Rapa Nui people, seemed to whisper of a once thriving civilization. But Roggeveen was puzzled by the impoverished state of the inhabitants. The grand canoes, marvels of Polynesian craftsmanship, had vanished, as had the lush forests that once covered the island. The Rapa Nui people were now living in a barren, deforested landscape, their society struggling to maintain its former glory. Subsequent visits by European ships brought new dangers that the Rapa Nui had never encountered before. The arrival of foreign diseases, such as smallpox and tuberculosis, began to ravage the population. These diseases spread rapidly through the isolated island community, leaving the Rapa Nui vulnerable and decimated. With their immune systems unprepared, entire families and villages were wiped out in a matter of months. The European ships also brought a wave of cultural upheaval. The once proud and independent Rapa Nui people found themselves facing the overwhelming influence of foreign customs and beliefs, which threatened to erase their ancient traditions. In the 19th century, a new tragedy struck Easter Island as Peruvian slave traders raided the island. These traders, driven by a thirst for labor, captured hundreds of Rapa Nui people, taking them to Peru to work on plantations and in mines. The island's population plummeted as families were torn apart, and the survivors were left devastated. These raids further weakened the already fragile island society, and the once vibrant culture of the Rapa Nui people began to fade into the shadows of history. By the time the island came under Chilean control in the late 1800s, only a few hundred Rapa Nui remained. Their numbers had been drastically reduced by disease, warfare, and the brutality of slavery. The survivors, now living under foreign rule, found their traditions nearly lost, their language fading, and their connection to the Moai statues growing distant. Despite the challenges, the Rapa Nui people struggled to preserve what remained of their culture, even as Easter Island itself became a symbol of both ancient grandeur and the devastating consequences of isolation and external exploitation. Chapter 5. The Legacy of Rapa Nui. Easter Island, known as Rapa Nui, stands today as a silent but powerful reminder of the triumphs and tragedies of human civilization. Once home to a thriving society that created the famous Moai statues, massive stone figures that continue to captivate people worldwide, the island now holds the echoes of a culture that rose to incredible heights before collapsing. The island's original inhabitants, Polynesians, are believed to have arrived around the year 1000, bringing with them sophisticated knowledge of navigation, agriculture, and art. Over time, they developed a unique society, marked by remarkable achievements in sculpture, engineering, and social organization. But as the population grew and resources became scarce, the balance of this isolated world began to shift. The once lush island, teeming with forests, was soon transformed into a barren landscape. Deforestation, driven by the overharvesting of trees for construction and the transport of the towering Moai, played a critical role in the collapse of the Rapa Nui civilization. As the forests vanished, the soil eroded, and the climate became less hospitable. It is believed that by the 16th century, the population of Easter Island had dwindled significantly, leading to social unrest and the eventual downfall of the once great society. Yet, despite these challenges, the Rapa Nui people's resilience remains evident today. The descendants of this ancient civilization continue to live on the island, preserving their culture, traditions, and language. While many of the Moai were toppled during periods of internal conflict, efforts to restore and protect these iconic statues have brought them back to their rightful places. The Moai are not just symbols of artistic achievement, but also reflections of the spiritual beliefs and societal structure of the Rapa Nui people. Each Moai represented an important ancestor, and they were believed to have powerful spiritual significance, serving as conduits between the living and the divine. Modern scientific studies, including DNA analysis and ecological research, have painted a clearer picture of how the Rapa Nui civilization rose and fell. The genetic makeup of the people confirms their Polynesian origins, and researchers have discovered how the island's ecosystem was deeply altered by human activity. This research has provided valuable insights into the environmental collapse and societal collapse that followed. The legacy of the Rapa Nui people is not just a tale of environmental devastation but a lesson in the fragility of human societies and the importance of sustainability. As the island continues to captivate the imagination of the world, it serves as a poignant reminder that civilizations, no matter how advanced, can fall if they do not heed the balance of nature. The story of Easter Island, of the Moai, and of the Rapa Nui civilization is more than just a historical enigma. It is a reflection of our own world. We too face challenges related to environmental sustainability, overconsumption, and the consequences of our actions. The Moai, standing tall against the windswept landscape of Easter Island, are a reminder of what we can learn from the past. They ask us to consider how our societies might endure, or vanish, based on the choices we make today. The history of Easter Island is not just about the rise and fall of a civilization long past. It is about our future, and the lessons we must learn before it is too late. And that's it, thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring historical worlds, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more exciting stories.